Senator Cruz, thank you for agreeing to sit down with us here in New Orleans.
It's great to be with you, Genevieve. Thank you for having me.
You just said to the crowd that you were very optimistic about the November elections. First of all, why are you optimistic?
I'm optimistic because the path we're on clearly isn't working. Obamacare is indefensible. Millions of Americans have lost their jobs, lost their health care because of Obamacare. More people have lost their health insurance because of Obamacare than have gotten health insurance under Obamacare. And all across the country, I think people realize this path is hurting millions of Americans. We've got the lowest labor force participation since 1978. And I think the American people realize we've got to go on a different course, which is why we're looking at races all over the country that are suddenly competitive, because Democrats are running scared. They can't defend Obamacare, but yet they're not willing to turn around and do anything to stop the harm that's being caused to millions of Americans.
You also made the comment a lot of folks within the party, however, say, well, we should just stay in the closet, let's not rock the boat. What should the Republicans do between now and November to keep the momentum, to keep it going?
Look, I think we need to go and make the case to the American people that there is a different path. Number one, explaining the harms that are coming from Obamacare. I think a big part of the reason we're in such a strong political position now is because of the leadership of so many millions of Americans last fall in the fight to stop Obamacare. I think that fight elevated the harms that Obamacare is causing. It elevated it in the national debate. It made it clear to all sorts of people who weren't really paying attention, wow, this thing is really a problem. And then it started hitting personally.
So you said you weren't happy with the way Senate Republicans handled the whole fight over Obamacare, but there were also issues like the debt ceiling debate. Why would people think it's going to be that different if Republicans do take the Senate? I mean, how different will a Senate Majority Leader McConnell be than a Senate Minority Leader McConnell?
Look, I hope we learn. I hope we learn that when we stand for principle, we win elections. I think the two most significant changes that will happen if and when Republicans take the Senate is, number one, I hope and believe we will start meaningful oversight of the executive branch from the Senate. Today, Harry Reid is the most important protector Barack Obama has, because he prevents the Senate from engaging in any hearings on the abuse of power, on the unconstitutional actions, on the lawlessness of the implementation of Obamacare. Some 37 times, the president just ignores the statutory text and decrees a unilateral change. He has no constitutional authority to do that. And with a Republican majority in the Senate, we can begin convening hearings systematically focusing on the abuse of power and the invasion of constitutional rights of the citizens. Secondly, the other thing we can do is we can begin voting on pro-growth measures to bring back economic growth and jobs. The top priority of Americans is jobs and economic growth. And in Harry Reid's Senate, we don't spend even a minute talking about jobs and economic growth. He prevents a vote on any meaningful tax reform, any meaningful regulatory reform, anything that would reduce the burdens to people who are struggling, small businesses, job creators. The people who have been hurt the most by the Obama economy are the most vulnerable among us. They're young people, they're Hispanics, they're African American single moms.
Okay, so let me ask you on that. Talking about all those groups that you just mentioned, how does the GOP do a better job of outreach and improving its brand? Senator Rand Paul, one of your colleagues, says we just need more Republicans with tattoos. What is your answer for expanding the GOP base?
You know, I don't think we need a new brand. I think we need to get back to our foundational principles. Listen, I don't think I'm terribly conservative. The views that I believe in are basic common sense principles that every small town in America, every small business, every family has understood for centuries. They're principles, basic principles of free enterprise, of individual responsibility. It's the understanding that you know, the old aphorism, teach a man to fish, you feed him for a day, or give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Those are the principles that built this country, along with rule of law, limited government, the Bill of Rights protecting the individual liberty of the citizenry. What we have seen under Barack Obama is an assault on those foundational principles. We've seen our free market principles undermined. We've seen our constitutional liberties undermined. The way Republicans win is we go and defend those principles. We get back to morning in America. I am optimistic, and I am convinced we are going to return to that shining city on a hill that is the United States of America.
Okay, this is the last question, has nothing to do with politics, but as a fellow Texan, I have to ask you, what's your favorite brand of boots?
Terrific question. I wear Lucchese's, and in fact, the boots I'm wearing now are black ostrich lucchese. That they are what I referred to as my argument boots. When I was the Solicitor General of Texas, representing Texas in the U.S. Supreme Court and all the appellate courts, I wore these boots just about every single argument I've done, and I wore them every day on the U.S. Senate with one exception, and I'm going to make an embarrassing confession here, which is when I did the filibuster on Obamacare, my friend Rand Paul had given me 2 bits of advice. He said, number 1, wear comfortable shoes, which for his filibuster he didn't. He said his feet were hurt for a couple of weeks. And he said, number 2, don't drink very much water. Both were great advice, and so I was sorry to say I listened to it. I went out and bought some black tennis shoes, left the argument boots at home and was wearing black tennis shoes. And I'll tell you, at about 4 in the morning, I confessed this on the floor of the Senate, and I said to all the Texans, let me apologize for my cowardice that I didn't wear the boots and instead wimped out and wore the tennis shoes instead.
Senator, thank you for sitting down.
Thank you.
Good story.